darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again.
Hello, this is Christopher from Defeat Modernism, and welcome to part 2 of the 3 Days of Darkness. If you haven't watched part 1, I suggest you start there first. I will put a link to the first episode in the description box of the video. And then I will also put links to a free PDF file, because it might be easier to read along with me on the PDF version than looking at it on the YouTube screen. And then also I will put a link to the actual hard copy of the book. I know some people prefer that. So let's pick up where we left off. We're going to be starting on page 11. Our Lord warns us that the politicians of the chamber of hell in Paris will destroy the arts with the purpose of erasing God and his laws from the minds and hearts of the people. And it is obvious that this concerns not only the visual arts, but also the humanities and liberal arts, such as theology, philosophy, history, law, etc. Wickedness is described as quote-unquote refined, to say that it is so smooth and thin that it is not noticed until it is too late. In fact, we are seeing the results of this reality of quote-unquote refined wickedness. Universities have become ultra-left liberals, and many so-called quote-unquote Catholic universities are anything but Catholic. And now we come to another of the prophecies of Marie-Julie Jahenny, and it states there, France will pay for its 200 years of quote-unquote democracy and its anti-Christian regimes that abolished the Catholic monarchy of France. But the monarchy will eventually be restored. And that was from April 20th, 1874. A bloody era is predicted, a century of new evil inventions never seen before. And the prophecy then continues. Satan and all the wicked are thirsting for Christian blood like never before. A time of genocide will come when evil leaders secretly agree to use the pretext of stopping the quote-unquote rebellion to gather Christians, Catholics, and to let them enter the churches where they will be martyred in the place where the Blessed Sacrament is located. And that was October 23rd, 1878. Now, this would apply to things that would have happened in France after this, but obviously what we're seeing today with the whole injection issue, that's obviously part of genocide and part of what they're going to use to claim who are the rebels as they prepare to call everyone who is against this Marxist, globalist, New World Order, dictatorship, technocracy, however you want to call it, as they call us, the domestic terrorists. So we're right there as far as, in my opinion, genocide goes. Now it continues. This is another prophecy here from December 17th, 1878. The wombs of women will be mercilessly hardened against children. And we have seen that with tens of millions of children in their mother's wombs being massacred here in the United States alone. And then another prophecy here, it's dated December 14th, 1881. Our Lady prays for France to save the cradle of innocence and allow the life of the little angels, for the innocence of children brings mercy to earth. Now this next is from September 24th, 1903. Parents will corrupt their children before they even reach the age of reason, and they will be raised in a climate of anti-religious hatred. It would have been better if these children had never been born. And then this next prophecy is from October 2nd, 1903. Children will grow up so as to lose their innocence even before the age of reason. They will grow up as quote-unquote adults. And these prophecies are shockingly accurate today with all the sodomite LGBT perversion that's being pushed on children clearly before the age of innocence, before the age of reason. They're indoctrinated in all this satanic, godless liberal, godless communist, however you want to call it, just pure evil. And so these prophecies have come to pass. I think one could argue we are a far worse generation than the generation of Noah or even Sodom and Gomorrah, just on the sheer scope and the whole fact that the gospel has been preached throughout the world. We do have the example of 2,000 years of the church and of the martyrs and of the saints, and yet man is actually, we haven't progressed. There's no progressiveness here. We've regressed back to paganism. So now let's continue. So there, that next paragraph in the bottom left corner, it says, children will not be educated to love Our Lady and her virtue of purity, but their upbringing will be aimed at the loss of children's souls. The Virgin Mary, quote, my beloved children, everything aims at an irreparable loss of salvation of children's souls. The nourishment of these little souls should be the bread of love of their Immaculate Queen, the Queen of Paradise. After the delivery of young teenage souls to Satan, the enemy of souls, I tell you that the most of these children are already on the path of corruption, without their souls having received a single drop of the scent of my virtues of purity. It is truly a tremendous pain, because if you knew their numbers, you would be terrified as if you were struck a mortal blow. Evil parents corrupt their children. And that was from Prophecy, a message from February 8th, 1904. And now this next is going to be from November 11th, 1924. And that message states, the warning of the great punishments will come when the great attacks against the church begin, which will be accompanied by an indoctrination of children aimed at erasing the name of God and all knowledge concerning him. And then it continues on. This is July 19th, 1906. When the evil persecution against the true faith and the genocidal revolution breaks out, it will be corrupt youth who will shout, death to Christians and death to Christ. They will be the worst enemies of Christ and the most active in bloodshed, in the desecration of churches, cemeteries, and the Holy Sacrament, and in breaking down and desecration of crucifixes. And then in that last sentence there from December 24th, it says 1984, but that must be, that has to be a typo. That obviously she didn't live that long. I would imagine that probably would have been 1908, maybe 1906. It says, in the past centuries of the earth, none will compare to this era. And as I was just saying, how true is that? And we got a taste of the corrupt youth with the Black Lives Matter and Antifa degenerates, what they were doing to those cities. Just wait until they're fully let loose. Now here we go on to this next section. It says Prophecies about the Catholic Church. And this is March 19th, 1878. The Church will suffer 3 great attacks, but faith will not wither. And then March 19th, 1878. The Church will be contaminated, the clergy will corrupt. Much suffering, torment, and bloodbath will be necessary to purify it before triumph is granted. And then September 19th, 1878. Much courage and blood will be needed to save the Church in danger. And now the author speaks. He says, not only did Marie-Julie Jahenny predict a diabolical century before Pope Leo XIII had had his famous vision of Satan, who was granted a century of freedom to destroy the Church, Marie-Julie cryptically predicted that hell would reduce the Leonine prayer, i.e. the removal of this prayer from Mass, to ashes. And again, she predicts this several years before the Pope's famous vision. See the prophecy dated July 7th, 1880. And now this next prophecy is August 5th, 1878. The corrupt clergy will be infected by the spiritual plague of degradation, the lack of true charity and love and mutual respect. If the clergy do not correct themselves, God will punish them, making them subject of scandals. God will send a serious warning. And now this next prophecy is from September 29th, 1879. You will see the scandals of the clergy with your own eyes. Pray for divine mercy. We have to expect to see everything. The crime brought to the altar, the Church will fail in her mission and will not seek to convert sinners, and the Lord is offended by those who should serve him. Then this from August 5th, 1878. A pope will suffer torment beyond his powers. He will be discarded and sidelined. And then you can see there in parentheses, the author is asking, was this not Cardinal Giuseppe Siri? Some of you may be familiar with the Siri theory. Those of you who are not, there is some FBI evidence. There is evidence suggesting that Cardinal Giuseppe Siri was elected both in the 1958 conclave, when John the 23rd then was supposedly elected. There was a curious white smoke that came out. There was a pope said that was elected on TV, on radio, but then that pope never appeared. And then the conclave continued until the election, or the so-called election of John the 23rd came about. And then again, I believe it was the now I don't know if it was 1978 or it was actually, it would have been the conclave for Paul VI, where he was then elected again, but then was threatened. Father Malachi Martin speaks of this. I have videos of this on my channel, and I might have to do a video on that separately. But just do some research on that topic, and you pull up interesting information. Obviously, there's pros and cons to it. The more I've studied it, the more it seems credible and it makes sense. And then that just lends to the credence of, these John the 23rd, Paul VI, etc., all being anti-popes, both because they were outright heretics prior to election, but also because the elections were a fraud. Now the author continues. He says, Marie Julie Jahenny predicted an exiled pope would suffer a long and painful martyrdom due to his exile. This could be a prophecy of the Pope himself, quote-unquote, discarded. And again, he asks about Cardinal Giuseppe Siri. And then, some people will argue, it's Benedict XVI, but Benedict XVI is a modernist heretic. He was one of the big players in Vatican II. He doesn't have the faith. He didn't have the faith prior to his election. He's one of the biggest destroyers of the faith. So personally, I don't view him as a Catholic, and I obviously don't view him as a pope. Now, the next prophecy is from January 11th, 1881. And she says, he will not have a voice like the past pontiffs, an indication that his voice will be silenced. But he will continue to provide for his children and the infallible church. And now to page 12. And for those of you who are just listening to the podcast, on the screen in the upper left-hand corner, there's a separate cutout, and there's a picture of Paul VI. Underneath it says, the first bowl of God's wrath. And then the author goes on. It says, interestingly, when Father Luigi Villa, in 1956, received from Padre Pio the task of dedicating his whole life to defend the Church of Christ from the work of ecclesiastical Freemasonry, to encourage him, the Holy Friar said to him, quote, you are a great friend of Cardinal Giuseppe Siri, end quote. In his second meeting, which took place in the second half of 1963, Padre Pio, after saying to him, quote, courage, 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 because the church is already invaded by Freemasonry, end quote. He immediately added, quote, Freemasonry has already entered the Pope's slippers, end quote. When Father Villa told me about this second meeting with Padre Pio, he said, quote, with these words, Padre Pio gave me a goal, Paul VI, end quote. Padre Pio's assignment was for Father Luigi Villa to become the architect of the first bowl of God's wrath. When Pius XII decided to give the papal mandate to Father Villa to carry out this task, he spoke with Cardinal Tardini, who was to communicate his decision to Father Villa's bishop. Talking to Cardinal Tardini on what to say to Monsignor Giambattista Bosio, the Pope said, quote, tell Monsignor Bosio that I gave the papal mandate to Father Villa, and that it is the first time that the church gives such an assignment to a young priest," end quote. And then added, "And it is the last." With these words, Pius XII recognized the true nature of the task entrusted to Father Villa, and that this task was unique in the history of the Church. The strange phrase uttered by Padre Pio, quote, "My mission will begin after I am dead," end quote, therefore acquires a particular meaning of his life in His Holiness. Only a saint like Padre Pio can transmit to a young priest such an assignment, and only his sanctity could convince a pope to give a papal mandate to the young priest to complete the mission of Padre Pio that would begin after his death. To carry out this mandate, Father Luigi Villa created the magazine Chiesa Viva in September 1971, about 3 years after the death of Padre Pio. The Apostate Church. The suppression of the Church and the formation of an apostate church will take place during the, quote, 3 periods of crisis of France, unquote. See below. So this next prophecy is from August 22nd, 1882. Before the punishments strike France, many souls will lose faith. France will be populated by masses of guilty men who, from the foundation of the lodges, work to glorify Satan by raising places of worship. And now this next prophecy is dated September 29th, 1879, and then also March 15th, 1882. Those who gather and fill the lodges await the moment to rise up and throw the mud of scandal upon the church. This next prophecy is from June 5th, 1904. Satan, full of euphoria, travels everywhere in the world, and within his homes, where the disciples who follow his doctrine live, he reveals to them his satanic secrets to losing their souls. Satan gives his advice, and the bloodhounds of hell drink the designs of his doctrines, made of spells and sacrilege. And now to April 12th, 1880. The suppression of God's works and the triumph of evil men will take place when devotion to the Sacred Heart is suppressed and fought against. Men will not want to admit that it is through the Sacred Heart that promised peace will come. Again, that was April 12th, 1880. And this suppression of the Sacred Heart, some of you might have seen in one of my videos, the Sacred Heart versus Divine Mercy, is that the Novus Ordo devotion to Divine Mercy has suppressed and replaced the Sacred Heart devotion with a devotion of false mercy by a religious sister whose works were originally banned. And really, a lot of things in there are just either ridiculous or just scandalous. But you'd have to watch the video to get the entire picture of it. But this is interesting. I didn't know about this particular prophecy to suppress the devotion to the Sacred Heart. Now, this next prophecy, it says, is from several dates. So it says, the wicked will manifest their fury against the devotion to the Sacred Heart. This next prophecy is was given in September 29th, 1879 and March 15th, 1882. Families will be forced to abandon religious educational institutions and replace them with secular schools. Religious, in this situation, will not be able to earn a living and will have to rely on divine providence. From October 11th, 1881. The Church and the faithful will have to privately buy the properties for Catholic schools, churches, hospitals, etc. The government will not return what it takes. If the properties are private, it will be difficult for the government to appropriate them and influence what is taught in schools, etc. July 21st, 1881. The Church will suffer such persecution that has never before been unleashed from hell. The bishops having already fled, the churches having closed, the souls will weep over abandonment and ruins. There will also be a hellish attack on devotion to the Sacred Heart. November 30th, 1880. An evil leader will rage 3 times against the Church and against the religious, who will be forced to hide in private homes of Christian families. But they will not yet be safe, since the wicked will enter the houses to find them. This black persecution will last until the great monarch is sent by God. And this is just kind of eerily similar to what we're seeing with this whole health quote-unquote crisis, and then authorities, primarily I've seen this done, and you've probably seen it too, in Australia and I guess Austria, coming into homes, or in China and taking people out. So it's all very, very curious how this is coming to pass, and I don't think anyone could have seen it happening like we're seeing it today. And now on to page 13, and this is from November 11th, 1924. Plots will be orchestrated by the wicked, who will wait for the moment when their leader gives the order, so that their plans can be put into action. Great persecution will break out. Many religious will be martyred, and traps will be placed in monasteries and cloisters. And that's from March 19th, 1878. October 23rd, 1879. The prophecy of the bloodthirsty century. Catholics will be surrounded on the pretext of stopping a rebellion to defend secular quote-unquote freedom. Catholics will be martyred in churches. And that kind of sounds like we're going through now with this whole domestic terrorism nonsense, at least here in the U.S. This next one from September 29th, 1879. The wicked will try to pass a law in France, an anti-clerical law against the church. God's ministers will be robbed of everything but the absolute necessary. They will be obliged to dress in common clothes to avoid persecution. The enemies of the church will try to turn churches into theaters or places for hellish dances. There will be priests who will not have the courage to defend the faith, and who will be paid to leave the church. And we've seen that over the past several decades since the Second Vatican Council, with churches being transformed into shopping malls, into discos, into all sorts of evils. And instead of being forced to wear common clothes, a lot of these modernist heretic priests and so-called nuns just wear common clothes because they don't have the faith, and they would be ashamed to wear such clothing. Now, continuing on, August 9th, 1881, the evil government of Paris will pass anti-clerical laws against the faith and the church, with the intention of transforming sacred places of worship into theaters of infernal abomination. The weak clergy will join the government. Many bishops will join the infernal regime, particularly in Paris, the south and the east of France. The south and east of France will become particularly evil. In Lyon, there will be blasphemous presentations of Mass, satanic desecrations, and visions. And that's from different dates. And really, again, I mean, we've seen this throughout the Novus Ordo with all the different horrors, from the clown masses, even just to the new Mass itself, is just a mockery of the traditional Latin Mass, the true and only Mass of the Roman Rite. Continuing, the government will pass a law requiring bishops to send a summons or an order to priests who are hiding in private homes of the faithful to surrender. Bishops will be forced to give an answer. Then the evil legislators will order all religious to leave France. The Jesuits will suffer in a particular way. However, there will be some good people who resist all these evil laws. Unfortunately, there will be many weak bishops who will fall and succumb to evil rule. Their weak faith will be a bad example and will cause the damnation of many souls. And that's from January 25th, 1882. The next two are from October 12th, 1882. And she says, in many cities, bishops will hold meetings on what to do with all these godless laws. However, only 3 bishops will remain faithful and endure what they know to be God's will. Many priests will fall and send letters trying to influence the faithful, saying that there is nothing wrong with government laws. The Pope will try to appeal to the faithful not to follow their example and to stand firm in faith, but few will listen. Many souls will be lost. So that seems to be something that probably already has come to pass. Perhaps one of the popes prior to John the 23rd taking the throne because the popes since him have done nothing but go along with the godless Masonic New World Order. Although perhaps this is a pope afterwards, hard to tell. Now, this next is September 29th, 1881. The sanctuary of the Sacred Heart will be used for the diabolical counsels of these evil men, from whom they will plan their betrayals, create organizations to close churches, close religious orders, and famous sites of apparitions. It sounds like the modernist church of today. Another one, this is September 29th, 1879, and then March 15th, 1882. In the sanctuary of the Sacred Heart, they will plot their last plans. Now January 27th, 1882. The sanctuary of the Sacred Heart will serve as the theater for all the wicked who are involved in human laws. From the sanctuary of the Sacred Heart, they will approve the evil laws that will lead to the apostate state religion, which will be approved in June. That was from several different dates, that prophecy. The place of prayer of St. Genevieve, her sanctuary, will become a theater of dances and hellish crimes. That's from January 27th, 1881. The suppression of church bells and funeral services will be imposed. They will erase all the memory of the Catholic religion and create an impious religion. September 6th, 1880. Monasteries will be plundered, masses parodied, funerals forbidden. And that's from several dates. And a lot of that happened after the Second Vatican Council. And really the new mass is just a parody. It's a Protestant fabrication that has no part in tradition. It's found nowhere in tradition. However, and this next prophecy, however, the Virgin Mary will protect the places where her miraculous statues are venerated. False deities will be worshipped. And that's what we saw Francis doing with the Pachamama. That's what we saw John Paul II and Benedict XVI going into synagogues, going into mosques, going into heretical assemblies, and taking part in false worship. The Pachamama is public idolatry. So for anyone to think that's okay, you just don't have the faith. You don't know. You don't know what you're talking about. And for someone like John Paul II to kiss the Quran, that's an act of apostasy. The Quran itself says that the mere idea of the Trinity is an excremental idea. They reject Christ as the Son of God. So he who rejects Christ as the Son of God, that is the Antichrist. And the same thing with the Jews, the modern Jews. They worship Lucifer as God. They don't worship the same God as us. If you look in the Talmud, they say that Christ and the prophets are burning in hell and excrement. They reject Christ. So they're not our elder brothers. They are worshippers of the devil. Continuing on, this next prophecy says the Pope will be attacked and taken prisoner. All ecclesiastical authorities will be persecuted. At first, they will be allowed to practice their ministry. Then, they will be removed from their posts, and then order will come for their departure. The wicked will take their place. New types of ceremonies will be put in place, but will be against the faith and divine laws. A new evil law will be passed that will require parents to let the evil authorities corrupt their children, but it will only last 44 days. And I'm going to just stop here for a second. And this is what we're seeing with coming out in the news, trying to ban parenthood. There was an article I saw yesterday, and I forget which paper. I think it was USA Today, or it might have been the Washington Post. It was one of these liberal rags who was saying that they want to ban parenthood for the sake of equality. It's all Freemasonry. And here in this prophecy, we see new types of ceremonies will be put in place, but will be against the faith and divine laws. Well, the new types of ceremonies is the new Mass and all the new sacramental rites, which was condemned by Session 7, Canon 13 of the Council of Trent, dogmatically. Can't be changed. No one can change the rites of the sacraments. And many people don't even know this, and they think that the popes and the bishops can do whatever they want. They can't. They can't create a new religion. They can't create new rites of the sacraments. Their whole purpose is to ensure that the received and approved rites, that is, the traditional rites, are handed down without corruption. They're not there to create a new religion or create a new theology or new sacramental rites. And just to quote the council, it says, "If anyone saith that the received and approved rites of the Catholic Church, wont to be used in the solemn administration of the sacraments, may be contemned, or without sin be omitted at pleasure by the ministers, or be changed by every pastor of the churches into other new ones, let him be anathema." So that's very plain and clear. There's no ambiguity there. And that's why the rites were never changed for 1,000+ years. As far as when we see the full beginning of the traditional Latin rite or Roman rite, obviously there was development over time, but then when the Protestant Reformation came, that was the time that the Holy Ghost instructed the Council Fathers to make the traditional Latin Mass, the Tridentine Rite, the rite of the Roman Church, of the Latin Rite. It's not talking about the Eastern rites. This is the Roman Church we're talking about here. And that's it. It's a solemn anathema. Can't change it, no matter what the modernists say, no matter what Francis thinks he can do or say. He has no power over it. It's beyond him because it is eternal. And for those of you who've maybe never saw that or heard that, show me where it says that the Pope can do anything, that he can change anything. It doesn't. There's nowhere it says that anyone can just change the rites into new ones. And this quote says the exact opposite, and it is dogmatic. So there you have it. And let's now continue on to page 14. Martyrdom will take place during this period, after which the punishment of God will come. August 10th, 1880. This is from September 19th, 1881. There will be few true priests, because many will let themselves be corrupted and join the revolutionaries. They will look forward to abandoning their habits and will spread the horror and abomination among the population. In these days of terror there will be priests, in France and abroad, who will not hesitate to break the seal of the confessional, to strip the faith and desecrate the church. So this has already happened, this prophecy, after Vatican II. Because the new sacramental rites, the new ordination rites, as I just explained from the Council of Trent, are first of all condemned. So even if they were quote-unquote valid, you can't go to the new Mass, you can't receive the new sacraments because they're condemned. Just like you can't go to the Orthodox, the different cults or different sects of the Orthodox, because even if they did have valid orders or rites, which in my opinion those are in doubt because of the infiltration of the KGB within the ranks of all the hierarchy. But even if, let's just say they were valid or are valid, you can't go there because it's illicit, it's condemned. So the same thing with the new Mass and the new sacramental rites, it's all condemned. And you can see the fruits of it. You can see the destruction in faith and morals. And you can see the increase in immorality throughout the Novus Ordo clergy. So it's not even a question. But, here the priests, they did abandon their habits. There was massive loss of people going to, the Mass or the new Mass, massive loss of religious and people or men going into seminary because it was a new faith, it was a new religion, and they didn't want to be a part of it. And this mainly happened during the reign of John Paul II. So he was no saint. He helped oversee the destruction of the church and all the immoral scandals. I mean, he did nothing. He was just a media circus, and the media built him up as an illusion, which many people, including myself, fell for. But just look at his fruits. There's no good fruit there. The man didn't even have the faith, because obviously, if you had the faith, you wouldn't be kissing the Quran. You wouldn't be doing all the things he did in Assisi, letting devil worshippers inside Catholic churches to offer incense to demons and whatnot. And that's all on film. I have it all on film on my channel. John Paul the Great Apostate is the name of one of the videos. The other is Ecumenism is the Enemy of Christ and His Church. You can all see it there. So let's continue down. This is March 29th, 1879. The church will be abandoned, deprived of the Pope. Prayers, all offices exiled from God and saints. They, certain evil forces or groups, will remove the crucifixes and statues of the saints from their shrines to break and desecrate them. Again, March 29th, 1879. So there you have it, deprived of the Pope. That's what I believe has happened since the death of Pius XII. We've been deprived of a Pope as a chastisement. It's a worse chastisement than any natural disaster for this to befall souls, to have no Pope for this length of time, to have no valid sacraments, or barely any. There's very few traditional groups that we can say really do have validly ordained priests from validly ordained or consecrated bishops. But there you have it. There's her prophecy. Deprived of the Pope. Now, June 15th, 1882. There will not remain in France one religious house or monastery in which you can escape the tyrants that will be there in this era. March 19th, 1878. There will be great apostasy. The infamy of corruption will spread throughout the world and cause major scandals. Woe to the priests who will ascend to the altars with corrupt intentions. And that's what we've been seeing since Vatican II, major scandals, even to this day, even more so with Francis in charge of the anti-Catholic Novus Ordo. June 15th, 1882. Bad Christians will not be happy with the loss of their soul during apostasy. They will hunt for souls, trying to get others to sin against the Christian faith and their duties. And that's what we're seeing with this whole LGBT propaganda, and now the push of the injection by supposedly, quote-unquote Catholic bishops, the quote-unquote Pope himself, and, these pathetic Novus Ordo priests. They want to lead everyone to hell, is essentially what they're doing. This next one is October 26th, 1882. It's time for the Great Schism. A certain bishop will lead the schism, and a group of his diocese will turn against the church and refuse to submit to Rome. Some men will enter into a false religion. Then many bishops will follow them with all the faithful. That is a false religion, and it will be the French bishops who will start it, and others will follow. These apostate bishops will be enemies of the great monarch chosen by God. Next is September 19th, 1901. Our Lady weeps because her warnings about La Salette have not been heard. Now she warns that as a result, bishops will become apostates, false apostles, and break with Rome and the Pope. They will listen to the evil government and also promote schism and encourage the faithful to save their souls during persecution by joining the schism. Priests will be uncertain, and many souls will end up in the abyss. Now, these past two appear to be talking about the time during the Great Monarch, not now, about schism then, because I would say we've really had the schism after the Second Vatican Council, and with the imposition of the new Mass, that would be the schism, because the new Mass is you could call it a schismatic rite, a heretical rite, but this sounds like it's coming from after the Great Monarch ascends the throne, because she says in that October 26, 1882, these apostate bishops will be enemies of the great monarch chosen by God. And it seems to follow this next one. And then on the bottom there it says the schism and the break with Rome. The bishops will indicate a council and send their requests to the Holy Father. Number 1, they will demand a reduction in his authority over them. Number 2, they will ask for a reduction in obedience to the Pope. They wish to be the authority and do everything in the Church. In response, the Pope will request reform or obedience by letter or encyclical, but will not receive any response. Number 3, the subsequent request of disobedient bishops will excite the little people of the earth. The schismatics will ask for more freedom for the clergy, not only for France, but also for Italy, Belgium, and many other nations. Number 4, the next request will cause dismay to the true faithful. These bishops will ask for the freedom of the clergy or the Pope, that they may not be more bound to obedience to him, and that they may be free to do what they want. A manifesto will be posted publicly inviting or calling on the people to follow the guilty authority of the time. It's November 2nd, 1882. And now here it says, priests in large numbers will separate themselves from the voice of authority. There will be a scandalous freedom of disunity, of levity, and that will spread to all the dioceses of France. That's April 24th, 1884. It seems to be talking somewhat of now, but more so after the coming of the great Catholic monarch, because we've seen all of this already with the reduction of authority and obedience to the Pope. And the modernist popes have promoted this. So, but this sounds as if there's a holy pope, a true pope there, not one of these modernist anti-popes, and that this will happen. So I guess if we live to see this, we'll know for sure. And now here on the bottom of page 14, it says France will become Muslim. And I don't think anyone could have imagined it back in the 1800s. And here we are. It basically has bowed to the demon Allah. She says on June 9th, 1881, a false religion resembling Islam will be forcibly imposed by the authorities. Catholics who have lost their faith will enter it. It will be a, quote, happy religion of a cheerful heart that will be completely stripped of the sacraments of the Church. To escape the death and suffering of persecution, many will enter this false religion. Many bishops will enter it, bringing souls to hell. During this period, young people will be spoiled, and the purification will be terrible. So that's really an eye-opener right there, and we're certainly not too far off from that happening, given what's taking place with the invasion of Islam into France. Now on to page 15. And this is from June 28th, 1880. A new diabolical service of worship, a universal ecumenical style, will be introduced by Satan. Ministers will wear red robes and cloaks. They will have some bread and water for service, but without a valid consecration. They will be allowed to do this right everywhere, under the open sky and in their homes. And that's from June 28th, 1880. There's a note in parentheses under it from the author. It says, wine is not mentioned as part of this service, and this would fit very well with the new religion that will be imposed on people of the Islamic type, in which the use of wine is prohibited. Now on to the next prophecy, more on the Mass. And it says in this prophecy, today I give you a warning. Disciples who do not belong to my holy gospel are making a great mental effort to create a second facsimile, to realize their idea under the influence of the enemy of souls. A Mass that contains hateful words in my eyes. When the fatal hour comes, when they test the faith of my eternal priesthood, it will be these documents that they will use to celebrate in the latter period. The first period is that of my priesthood that has always existed after me. The second period is the period of persecution, when the enemies of faith and holy religion will formulate and impose by force these documents as the book of the second celebration. These infamous spirits, or infamous minds, are those who have crucified me and who are waiting for the reign of a new Messiah to be happy. Many of my holy priests will reject this book, sealed with the words of the abyss. Unfortunately, they will be an exception, and this book will be used. And that's November 27th. It was either 1901 or 1902. So this is certainly, he's talking about the new Mass. This is the second book, the book of the second celebration, because it is a fabricated rite found nowhere in tradition. It is an ecumenical style rite, as she was talking about, that will be used in that Islamic worship service. The new Mass is just building, preparing the way for all of this. But obviously, Christ is pretty clear in what he's saying here, that the Mass contains hateful words in his eyes, because it goes against what the Holy Ghost said. The Council of Trent, Session 7, Canon 13. There's also another canon that forbids the use of the vernacular in the Mass. So, continuing on here, July 21st, 1881. Before the end of the century, they will have already covered our Lord with all sorts of insults, torn apart the gospel and religion, founding and transforming everything into a frightening form. The holy sacrifice on the altar will have taken on a frightful shape. And then July 21st, 1881, bishops will betray and join the false church of state. And this is what we've been going through. So many people just can't see it, who are stuck in the Novus Ordo or just grown up in it. They think that's the Catholic Church. It's not. It's completely different from what the true saints had taken part in and offered and died for. This new mass has borne nothing but bad fruit, immorality, apostasy, all sorts of perversion, and it's not Catholic. It's ecumenical, it's Protestant, it's Masonic. That's the reality. And I can only hope and pray that people who are seeing this and reading this for the first time, that you might do more research on the condemnation of modernism by Pope St. Pius X and the combination of ecumenism, I believe by Pius XI, the condemnation of the new theology that triumphed at Vatican II by Pius XII. It's all there. Everything that we're going through since Vatican II has already been condemned. With people, with imposters, with faithless, immoral, godless people who've infiltrated the church and now control the buildings, they don't possess the faith. They're just infiltrators. So on to May 10th, 1904. The wicked will not stop on this odious and sacrilegious road. They will go further to compromise everything. At once and in one fell swoop, the Holy Church, the clergy, and the faith. The bishops will be replaced by others formed from hell, initiated to every vice and to all the wicked iniquities that will cover the souls of dirt. New prayers for new sacraments, new temples, new baptisms, new confraternities. So wow, there it is. All the Novus Ordos, they're condemning all these prophecies are all against the new rites, the new sacraments, those new evil churches that they've been building. Hideous temples. Continuing on, this is August 9th, 1881. Among the new bishops, an entire generation will be without faith. They believe in the power of our Lord, but they do not. For salvation, for good, and for the protection of souls. Those who spread this weak faith will not be forgiven. The French clergy will be more guilty than the others, and will be punished more than the others, but the clergy will grow up corrupt everywhere. Again, this is everything that's taken place since the Second Vatican Council. These men have no faith, and those who spread this weak faith will not be forgiven. So this is a sin against the Holy Ghost, obviously. This next from 1881. Woe to the priest who does not consider the solemnity of his vocation. Bishops will be willing to abjure the true faith to save their lives. The clergy will be the cause of the greatest scandals and will give the last sword blow to the Holy Church. July 1st, 1880. All works approved by the infallible Church will cease to exist. When this happens, great signs will manifest themselves on earth, and darkness will descend on the Church. And in return, God will bring down the darkness on earth. July 10th, 1879. There will be war and fury against the Church. Religion will be weaker and weaker. In a short time, it will be abandoned by the whole world and in large parts of France. There will be no more shrines. Bishops will flee and holy souls will weep on the abandoned ruins. September 29th, 1880. Satan will be allowed a complete triumph before a short time. Satan to our Lord. I will attack the Church. I will tear down the cross. I will divide or cause division between people. I will deposit in hearts a great weakening of faith, and there will be a great betrayal. I will become for a time the supreme master of all things. I will have everything under my empire, even your temple and all that is entirely yours. And this is eerily similar to the vision that Pope Leo XIII saw when Satan basically said that he could destroy the Church. He just needed more time and more control over the people who would do his bidding. And Christ granted it to him. And this is what we are sadly living through. July 25th, 1882. Paris will be completely devastated by those sacrilegious men. And in quotes it says, the anti-clerical civil war and the disintegration of sacred places in Paris, end quote. And we can think of the destruction of the Notre Dame Cathedral, I guess that was last year, or the year before, I can't remember. July 25th, 1882. They will not stop their sacrilegious outrages even when they see the arrival of the great monarch. They will persist in doing evil. And sadly, that's really what a lot of these people in the Novus Ordo will do and continue to do, because they cannot see. And they just persecute those of us who are traditionalists. As I said in the last one, everyone goes to heaven except us who believe in tradition, according to these perverse people. And then down that last sentence there on page 15, it says, this is the time to declare which side you intend to be on, either to live and die in the Catholic faith or to take a stand for your enemies. And that's becoming even more clear with this whole healthcare mandate wickedness. Now on to page 16. September 20th, 1881. It is time to look up to heaven, because in every corner of the earth there will be the Antichrist, as in the time of the Last Judgment, which will travel the whole world to pervert, to weaken, and to threaten the faith of Christians. October 19th, 1911. The Antichrist has begun his appearance on earth, but he will multiply. Very soon he will expand throughout the earth. He will possess souls, and above all many priests, monks, and nuns. He will enter these souls. He will make them do unheard of wonders. And what are these unheard of wonders? These are false miracles. And I would submit that these supposed Eucharistic miracles in the new Mass are part of that deception, because the new Mass, again, is condemned by the Council of Trent. It is an ecumenical, heretical, evil, sacrilegious rite. And then other wonders, like the false apparitions in Medjugorje. I even believe that Garabandal is also a deception, because nothing has come of that. The seers went Novus Ordo. Joey Lamangino died. He said that Padre Pio told him that he would get his vision and sense of smell back. There was the night of the screams. The children were walking backwards, and all these activities that are closer to, in my opinion, demonic possession than anything from heaven. And that's just my inclination on this, on those apparitions. Again, let's continue down. September 29th, 1880. Demons will come together, many in human form. They will do false miracles. Many of these demons will even wear the robes of God's true servants. They will have a strange and fierce hunger for human flesh and blood. They will yearn for the death and bloodshed of the true faithful. And then in parentheses, the author writes there, they will plan the genocidal persecution of Christians. Sounds like what we're about to undergo here through this healthcare dictatorship. But you see, the demons can take on the image of good people, of holy people, of priests, of nuns, of whatever you want, whatever you think in your opinion is holy. And that's why miracles are no proof of anything in today's day and age, because there's all sorts of magicians that can do all sorts of things, all sorts of illusions, and people just follow the crowd. They like novelty, they like new things, and they want to be told what to do. They don't want to actually study for themselves. They don't want to learn the faith. They just want to follow. So, if you want to follow those people, you can follow them into hell. That's your free will. Now, here we go. November 13th, 1924. Our Lord speaks here. Quote, if you knew the infamous correspondences that are under the influence of Satan. They sell my holy church. They sell in secret the head of the priest. They sell in secret the poor earth, that they subject to a horrible punishment. All is delivered up. Everything is sold, and plots being hatched. Every day, the hunger for human flesh to devour, the thirst for human blood, makes all their bodies seethe with unrest and a desire to reach the goal as soon as possible. All this is happening in the room of hell, Chamber of Deputies, in parentheses, it says there, under the chairmanship of souls sold to the spirit of evil. And this is really what we've been seeing build up now today. I mean, the desire of human flesh through abortion, through the selling of human parts, baby parts, even live people, in primarily the organ harvesting in satanic China. So this is all going on. It's been going on for a long time, but now we're really seeing it out in the open. Then continuing on, June 28th, 1880. In the years in which universal mass will be introduced, or about to be introduced, Satan will make many revelations by sending false mystics and visionaries. He will be so cunning in his plans that it will be difficult to unmask his fake messages, and it will seem that these mystics are truly authentic. Satan will attempt to lose people's souls through these false revelations, or waste time in masking them all, or even just to cause nothing but struggle and contention between false mystics and the attempt of the faithful to expose them as false. End quote. So again, this is certainly Medjugorje, which promotes false ecumenism, unending messages, complete circus atmosphere. The priest who was the so-called spiritual director was of these visionaries was removed because he ended up having relations with a nun and left the priesthood. There's so much there. I'll have to do a separate video on that. Katie Zaviva has a book on that called Medjugorje. The Madonna? No, the devil. So maybe I'll look to do that in the coming weeks or months. But even Father Gobi, the Mary Movement of Priests, another false visionary, Bayside, all of these unapproved apparitions, anything that promotes Vatican II and the new Mass, ecumenism, that's how you know it's false. Primarily. Continuing on, this next one is a prophecy from different dates. It says there will be many possessions and diabolical obsessions before the crisis breaks out, as well as many apparitions that will bring quote-unquote happy messages. So again, the Medjugorje and all that other nonsense. December 14th, 1881. The devil will show up in various apparitions. Woe to those who make deals with the characters in these diabolical visions. In the months that lead to the great crisis, many souls will be possessed, the world will go mad, and the devil will be present to make people renounce their faith and deny the cross. September 18th, 1896. When the Great Terror spreads, and during the days of God's righteousness, many priests will abandon faith for a more comfortable life of the apostate faith. To save their lives, they will end up becoming traitors to the priesthood like Judas and lose their souls. Sounds like the Novus Ordo, quote-unquote, priests. And now, even more so with those that are forcing people to take this evil injection. June 15th, 1882. Do not be cowardly Christians. Those who will be cowards will not remain in the faith, will be guilty like those who want to destroy everything and who will try to overthrow the kingdom of Christ. The next one, don't follow the crowd. Many will abjure the faith and cast the cross to save themselves during persecution. Do not follow their example. Do not trample on the cross. Your courage will soften the executioners. That's February 2nd, 1882. August 19th, 1878. Despite the attacks and plots to overthrow her, the Church will remain infallible. And yes, that is the traditional Catholic Church, the remnant, the few, not the billion Novus Ordo Catholics who don't have the faith. So let's be clear. September 29th, 1879. If it had not been for the prayers and sacrifices of the faithful, and also for the masses, to retain the righteousness of God, the punishments would have happened long before. And those are the prayers and sacrifices of those who actually have the faith and those who offer the true Mass, the traditional Latin Mass. August 14th, 1928. Evil on earth will continue to grow, and divine justice will be obliged to send more punishments. The sacrifices and prayers of the faithful will reduce punishment. Heaven will ask for sacrifices to appease divine justice. Now on to the next section, which is titled The Punishments of France. March 9th, 1878. Before sinister warnings appear on earth, everyone will feel in their hearts that the time must not be far away before the punishments arrive, and feel the righteousness of God in their hearts. Everyone will feel a restlessness in their hearts before the punishments arrive. And I would have to say I do feel that now, just with we're seeing taking place worldwide. And now on to page 17, and it starts here with, quote, "Punishments will begin when respect for the Sacred Heart is lacking and charity is cooled. However, the faithful who have accepted the warnings and who have conformed their lives to them will be guaranteed the grace of peace. Despite knowing that the punishments are coming, they will have an inner peace." It's October 27th, 1876. Marie Julie Jeheny was informed that she would live until she saw the beginning of the punishments. She had died in 1941 and therefore saw the beginning of World War II. And that was from a prophecy of October 27th, 1876. Now to September 20th, 1880. Warning signs will be given in kind at the beginning of each year. Our Lord will give his warnings in the first months of the year, when it is not yet spring. June 15th, 1882. The events of the punishments will be similar to those leading to the day of the Last Judgment. It's August 26th, 1878. And now August 26th, 1878 again, it says, "Suddenly many false, demonic, and visionary miracles will appear on earth. When this sudden proliferation of false mystics and creators of wonders appears, this will be a sign that God is preparing to strike the earth." February 10th, 1876. "The first to suffer the punishments, it will be France, being the eldest daughter of the Church and the nation destined to liberate and save the Church." January 4th, 1884. "The crisis will suddenly erupt and the punishments will be shared by everyone and will happen without interruption. The world will become like a vast graveyard. The bodies of the good and the bad will cover the ground. Famine will be great and confusion will be everywhere." And that's something that sounds like may not be too far off with what some doctors are predicting will happen to those who have taken these injections, and also with the subsequent loss of life, you would have few people being able to actually raise crops, transport, the supply chain issues. It just makes things exponentially worse. So, yeah, I think we might see that pretty soon. Let's see. So now, let's go on to the next one. This is June 15th, 1882. "It will be the horrors of the Revolutionary Civil War that will free France." February 1941. "France, for its purification, repair, and atonement, will have to suffer through the Great Bloody War. The triumph will not take place until the suffering is completed. Jesus Christ, wishing the triumph to reach its greatest rewards, will allow the sufferings of war to be intense, thus shortening the time while still having the full and necessary atonement." It's February 1941. And now this next one is from September 20th, 1879 and March 15th, 1882. This says, "A warning. Shortly before the revolutionary plans of evil men are put in place, Our Lady will appear in the surroundings of La Salette to give a warning." Now on to November 16th, 1882, September 29th, 1879, and March 15th, 1882. These prophecies say, "There will be another warning. Our Lady will appear in Amiens with the Holy Child to warn the people. A sign will appear in the sky, and a child's pain-filled voice will announce the horrors that are about to fall on the country. The baby will speak for 27 minutes. The warning will not only be for France, but will be universal, a warning to all nations." Now on to October 5th, 1881. And actually, just to step back there, some people might say, well, isn't this the warning of Garabandal? No, this is completely different than what was predicted there, which was more or less like some type of, in my opinion, like a New Age illumination of conscience. This is very different. Okay, again, on to October 5th, 1881. This unhappy time of war and plague will have 3 periods of crisis. And now on to the next heading. It says France's 3 periods of crisis. The Universal Revolution will begin in France and will include 3 periods of crisis. August 25th, 1882, she says, at the beginning of the first crisis in France, there will be painful news about the people of England, Persia, which is modern-day Iran, and Jerusalem. They will be subject to great wrongs. August 25th, 1882, she says, at the beginning of the first period of crisis, there will be a new kingdom for English land, and the choice will be made when, suddenly, death strikes those who hold the helm of this kingdom. The difficulties will begin for this land, which will be divided into 4 parts, because no agreement can be reached. The Catholic proposal will be rejected. May 18th, 1881, the prophecy says, England will betray its people under the empire of a queen. After the queen has left the throne, things will not go as the Lord demands. Now, onto the first period of crisis. June 15th, 1882, she says, the first crisis will not be everywhere, but will be located in France. The next 2 crises will expand everywhere. Violence and evil will come in the last 2 periods of crisis. May 9th, 1882. The first crisis will last 3 months, while the beginning of the deadly revolutionary crisis will last 4 weeks. It will be during these first 2 crises that the foreigner will be called to enter France, and foreigners will not be deaf to the call. They will have the freedom to do what they want during the first fights, and will not be punished for the crimes they commit. The surrounding countries will also join the bloody revolution. Well, that's happening now. That's all these Muslims coming in, and all these people from Africa and the Middle East being flooded into France. November 30th, 1880. Less than desirable foreigners will be brought in, and France will not be able to reject them. When this happens, the nobility of France will be lost. When these undesirable foreigners enter France, sacrilegious attacks will occur. And this is happening on a daily basis with these Muslims, these migrants, so-called, coming in, destroying churches, rapes, murders, beheadings. It's just unbelievable. These prophecies are just amazing. December 8th, 1874, the largest punishments will begin in Paris. October 27th, 1876, Paris will have most of the punishments that will strike France. December 18th, 1874, she says, 24 hours before the uprising breaks out in Paris and Rome, there will be signs of warning in the firmament. So I guess something similar to what Our Lady of Fatima mentioned. March 19th, 1878. Plagues will break out, followed by corruption and anarchy. The attack on the church will take place when, during anarchy, the wicked put the funeral cloth on the church. And then on the bottom there, page 17, Friends of the Mary Julie Association made the following observation, quote, there will be torrential rain. Then, when the security forces in France find themselves reduced in number for the sending of a large part of the French armed forces abroad, to the east and to Arab lands, the infamous laws against the church and against religion will be promulgated, and ties with Rome will be severed. The power of politicians will be exercised over the clergy by beginning its oppression. This was an observation given April 20th, 1882. This is from June 1st, 1877. The evil conspirators will plan the revolt. They will hide the explosives under the walls of Paris. Ardent hell will begin, and the destruction and death of many. September 29th, 1880. Blessed are those who will stay away from the walls of Paris when the horrors will break out. The genocide of Christians and then the complete destruction of the city will begin. September 20th, 1881. Pray for Paris. Only a few souls managed to escape. July 23rd, 1925. Stay away from Paris, which will be described as Babylon. November 23rd, 1882. Civil unrest will be provoked by the rulers. They will They will deprive workers of their work and employment. When this happens, the unrest will begin by agitators that will cause blood, murder, and fire with the use of explosives to destroy the strongest walls that have ever been built. September 29, 1879 and March 15, 1882. Civil unrest will begin with economic hardship. France will be inundated with people out of work, people unable to find asylum or refuge, and agitators will travel the country inciting workers to revolt. September 20th, 1881. As soon as the evil conspirators have lit the spark that will cause fire, they will flee and take shelter. They will open all the gates of France to all those who wish to occupy France. It's just unbelievable because this is all happening. All the migrants and now all the restrictions for the injection. So we're right there. We're right there right now. Continuing on, January 4th, 1904. The Virgin Mary says, quote, "The French people will be very unhappy. All doors will be completely open to foreigners of all tongues, and to all those who wish to enter this cursed Sodom, Paris, above which the justice of my divine Son is suspended." End quote. April 27th, 1877. Screams of despair will explode in the months of the Sacred Heart and the Most Precious Blood. So that's June and July. This will be a sign of the beginning of the Civil War in Paris. October 27th, 1877. The bloodbath will begin, and the government, when it sees the beginning of the carnage, will flee, disappearing like a bird in another nation, so as to leave France at the beginning of its revolution, and with nothing to stop it. And this will happen in June, just when the wicked will pass a law that will make the new apostate religion legal. The clergy who accept this religion will have to swear loyalty to the new form of divinity. That's a prophecy from several dates. Continuing, the guilty men who started the massacres will immediately disappear. As soon as they depart, resounding cries will return to Paris. It will be the screams of godless people who will celebrate their entry into this bloody hour. These screams will continue for several days, and then spread across the nation. Do not build a house or stay in France, because it will be lost. Only Brittany will be spared. And that's from September 20th, 1881. Now December 23rd, 1881. The screams of Paris will start the carnage. Will begin first with a horrible blasphemy, followed by cries, hateful songs, and confused screams. Poor, innocent people stuck in the city won't have time to escape. The roads will be closed and the passages blocked. This will be the time of the massacre. There will come a terrible thunderstorm with lightning that will last 2 days, but nothing will stop the massacre, which, too, will last 2 days. Christians will die shot and guillotined. October 27th, 1877. All the children of God, good and bad, will rebel. June 1st, 1882. France will be marked with a red sign of the return of terror. July 25th, 1882. The guillotine will return. June 15th, 1882. During these massacres, the earth will be inundated with blood, as it did during Noah's time, when the earth was flooded with water. April 8th, 1880. A terrible prodigy will appear during the crimes and massacres. A black and blue rainbow will appear, and a red rain will fall that will coagulate on all the houses, adhering like a paint. It will fall on the earth, but you will not be able to drink it. Then, in this red rain, a sign of terror will appear. A cross in heaven will form, an image of Christ. Everyone will be hit by a brand of terror that will be unable to remove. After 3 days, the rain will pass through the world. And that was April 8th, 1880. And then March 9th, 1878. A shower of blood will fall from the extraordinary cloud and coagulate on the earth for 7 weeks. A terrible fire will come from the earth and send terrible heat and a poisonous stench. My people will remain locked up for 7 weeks. And I will end this part 2 here. I hope to see you in the next episode.